It starts with a Telegram account, and the Telegram account has been taken over by the threat actors. It used to belong to like a real person like you. When you get on the call, their scam version of Zoom will basically tell you that your audio device, it can't hear you, your audio device isn't working, you need to do something. And then the threat actor will also be in Telegram being like, I can't hear you. Like, I see you, but I can't hear you. What's going on? They then prompt you to download an Apple script usually, which just completely wrecks your computer with like the deepest malware. They're very helpful. These scammers are very helpful. They'll help you troubleshoot your issue.
And they helped me troubleshoot a little bit too well, because my Mac's permissions were set up in such a way that the original link did not automatically download the malware. And so I had to run the script through terminal. I feel moron in retrospect, because that should have been, the alarm bell going off. But everything else up to that point, it's like I have a chat history with this person. It's a friend and a former colleague. There was the video of him. Now, the video was weird because it's obviously not a live feed. And you mentioned that they're not deep fakes. They're actually recorded videos, which is also really freaking terrifying. And the whole thing had a weird feel about it, but I was up super early. I was also taking care of my daughter at the time. And so there were so many inputs I wasn't thinking about. And it just goes to show how freaking crazy some of these phishing attacks have come. And this one is by far the most sophisticated I've ever seen.
Welcome back to the Blockspace Pod, brought to you by CleanSpark. The North Korean hacking syndicate Lazarus Group has stolen more than $300 million in crypto in the last year alone, using a highly sophisticated phishing attack that targets users' Telegram accounts. I was personally victimized by this phishing attack in December. I didn't lose any coins as a result, but I did lose access to my nearly 10-year-old Telegram account as a result. To diagnose this problem and explain how users can shield themselves against it, I wanted to have on Taylor Monahan, today's guest, who is a security lead at MetaMask. Taylor has been not just spearheading efforts to track down how many users have been affected and map out a web of those infections, but also to target the hackers themselves and try to frustrate their attempts by stealing their payloads and kind of DDoSing them by trolling them over Zoom calls. If you've heard about this attack, if you've been a victim to it, I highly recommend listening to this podcast, because Taylor gets into the nitty-gritty of just how this phishing attack works, what the malware does and why it's so hard to find on Mac devices, and also how they know that this is probably North Korean actors behind this attack. You're listening to the Blockspace Pod. Enjoy the episode, y'all.
Taylor Monahan, welcome to the Blockspace Pod. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I've been better. Roughly, I didn't have my life savings stolen because I use hardware wallets for mostly everything. I did have Telegram attacked and compromised, and you actually pointed out before we hopped on that you noticed that because we have a chat history going back to at least 2019 when I was at Bitcoin Magazine. For those who don't know, Taylor was a fantastic resource for the Quadriga CX hack. Or not hack, rather. Well, we still don't really know what happened. But with the exit scam at Quadriga CX. But anyway, so I've actually was a victim of this phishing attack, and I didn't realize how widespread it was until we started DMing and I started looking at how much documentation you've done for it. So before we get into the details, can you give our listeners a breakdown of exactly what this attack is and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously, like, we're going to focus on like one very narrow sort of most interesting sector, but like the attack in general is like has many flavors. And so if you are aware of this and stay aware of it, you'll protect yourself from like a huge number of scams and attack vectors. And so the first thing to know is that it starts with either a Telegram account or a LinkedIn or a Twitter, usually Telegram these days. And the Telegram account has been taken over by the threat actors. And it used to belong to like a real person like you. And you use this Telegram account to have conversations with people. We found that they really like, for people who go to conferences, this is like a common experience. You meet someone at the conference for a minute, you have like a great conversation, and then you'll exchange Telegram handles, but you'll DM each other initially, like with like a selfie or like, hey, what's up? We should catch up later. When they get their hands on like one of those accounts, they go to town because that type of person has like hundreds, thousands of these messages, and they'll just go through and they'll re-up the conversation as if they were that person. So that's step one, is they get the account, this legitimate account that already has connections and followers and message history. Step two is that they will just mass DM everyone in like everyone. Right now, their favorite like message to send is something about like Happy New Year. And so they're like, Happy New Year, let's catch up. During like other parts of the year, they'll usually like just be more generic, but it's generally something like, we haven't spoken in a long time. I hope you're doing well. Let's catch up. Super casual. They're not pushy. They don't write essays. They just drop a little ping. And then if you respond to that, they will then like share a Calendly link or ask you for your calendar and set up a call. And so that interaction is like a very normal interaction. And it's very hard for people to detect that this is a scam because it's literally the legit Calendly, legit interaction with an account that you have message history with. Okay, then the third part is the call itself. And the call itself is super sneaky. One thing that they also do, which is like, it blows my mind, but it's like very effective at disarming people. They will often reschedule the calls or delay the calls just like a normal person does. And it's the most off-putting thing because even if you're like, I don't know, this might be a scam, this person, like, they'll like wait a week to get on the call and then they'll push it last minute. They'll be like, hey, sorry, can we meet in 30 minutes? Or can we
it'll be like,
tomorrow?
oh, my really busy friend or colleague is having a day, and they have to put it off. That is a pretty disarming tactic.
It's super weird. And it's really particular to these threat actors. I don't know if they are actually just really busy and they like fuck up the time zones. That's like, or if they've like figured out that this is a disarming tactic, but it is super disconcerting because again, this is all set up for the call. When you get on the call, it looks like Zoom. Sometimes it looks like Teams. Supposedly there's Google ones out there. I've never seen them, but at some point they'll have a Google one. It looks exactly like Zoom or Teams or Google. They use like the website, the code, the CSS, the JS, it's a clone. And it's pretty well executed. The second disarming thing about these guys is that they actually have videos of the person that you are about to talk to. And that video is actually playing in this fake Zoom, Teams, Google, whatever, in this thing. And so when you join the call, you see yourself, your Chrome browser will like ask for your thing, and you will see the person that you're about to meet on the call. And like sometimes like a colleague or a partner or another person in the ecosystem will also be there. However, unlike a normal call, but actually having technical shit happen and not being able to join a call like right off the bat is a very common experience. Like super like when we were starting this podcast, in fact, we were sitting here like trying to figure out the audio shit, trying to figure out the thing. Why isn't it local, right? Super common. And so their scam version of Zoom will basically tell you that your audio device, it can't hear you, your audio device isn't working, you need to do something. And then the threat actor will also be in Telegram being like, I can't hear you. Like, I see you, but I can't hear you. What's going on? And they then prompt you to, it like forks. So if you're on a Mac, it'll download an Apple script usually. And then you click it and it runs in this program called Apple script. And that basically goes and it gets another payload, which gets another payload, which just completely wrecks your computer with like the deepest malware. If you're on Windows, they typically will do a little pop-up and you have to copy paste this code and they tell you to run it in like PowerShell or Terminal or Run or whatever the Windows version is. But it looks like it's pinging the normal Zoom. It looks like, I don't know, like it's not that far out of the realm of possibility. It's not downloading a PDF. It's not downloading an exe. So even the people that are aware of scams and aware that like I shouldn't install an exe on my computer from a random person often don't necessarily like aren't immune to this one, right? And because you sort of have these different things hitting you because the information's been displayed very well, like it's not super janky, You have people pinging you in Telegram. They're very helpful. These scammers are very helpful. They'll help you troubleshoot your issue.
Yeah, they helped me troubleshoot a little bit too well because my max permissions were set up in such a way that the original link did not automatically download the malware, and so I had to run the script through terminal. I feel moron in retrospect because that should have been, the alarm bell going off. But everything else up to that point, it's like I have a chat history with this person. It's a friend and a former colleague. There was the video of him. Now, the video was weird because it's obviously not a live feed. And you mentioned that they're not deep fakes. They're actually recorded videos, which is also really freaking terrifying. And the whole thing had a weird feel about it, but I was up super early. I was also taking care of my daughter at the time. And so there were so many inputs I wasn't thinking about. And then going back to the cleverness of this, one thing I'll say, maybe we chalk this up to workload, to where they just finally got to mine after the backlog of all the other compromised computers. But I ran multiple malware scans. Nothing came up for multiple different softwares and like paid ones, right? Nothing came up. I thought I was fine. 2 weeks later, Telegram's gone. So if you had one of these meetings and you think you're okay, as you pointed out in your thread, turn your Wi-Fi off, immediately wipe that computer. Don't use it for anything related to hotkeys or anything sensitive.
Don't use don't use
the other thing I would say is this is where 2FA matters so much, especially like Google Authenticator. I had 2FA on everything sensitive, and I think that probably ended up saving my ass on a lot of stuff in the long run. But
the phones. So like for me personally, like I use my iPad and my iPhone, like I use them way more than my computer for random semi-risky interactions. This is especially true since I had my daughter, because as you point out, there is like normal crypto stress, brain being full things. You have so many inputs. When you add the in real life child to the mix, like I just realized like there's no way that I'm like mentally capable of detecting bad things. Like if my daughter starts crying or like breaks something or like wants goldfish, like that is going to take priority over my scam detection. And so I definitely I recommend the way that your like iOS and like your iPhone and iPad, the way that it's set up architecturally, it's just way more sandboxed, which is why you don't see these like total, you basically have to be like, there's only a few people on earth that got like malware for like phones. But then also like, having your 2FA codes on your phone or even like as an external, like a YubiKey, both of those will help significantly mitigate the damage, even if your computer gets wrecked.
Yeah, it was a lifesaver for me. There are a few good hygiene things that I've picked up over the last, 9 years or so. I will say it was the first time I've gotten got, so to speak, and it just goes to show how freaking crazy far some of these phishing attacks have come. And this one is by far the most sophisticated I've ever seen.
We are CleanSpark, America's Bitcoin miner, a publicly traded company with the largest operating hash rate, powered entirely by self-operated infrastructure across 4 states. This is our proof of work, and we are setting the standard for what's next. Learn more about the intersection of energy and Bitcoin at CleanSpark.com.
You said as of December 12th, there's like roughly or just over $300 million stolen through this scam. How are you arriving at that number? And if you had to give an estimate since then, since it's so widespread, what would you put it at?
Yeah. So the $300 million number, that is, let's call it, that's the total for this subcluster, this like one particular threat group. That's the total that I've tracked of these threat actors that they've stolen in like the last year-ish. It's like the very end. I think it's like the very end of it was basically a full calendar year. So like December 2024 to December 2025. The reason I know this number is because I'm insane. No, the reason I know this number is because it's such a particular MO and it's very hard to stop. Most other threats we are able to get our arms around in some way, shape, or form. Like, for example, there's very similar like Zoom, Teams, fake call malware. They're relatively easy to do any number of things to like stop their spread. These guys are very dedicated and very annoying. I hate them very much, and I would like them to stop. But you have to stay on top of them, and you have to stay on top of their, like, because they're constantly pivoting on like the prior victims. If you lose the trail, so to speak, you like kind of lose eyes on them completely. And so the reason I stay on top and I track their theft so carefully is because what we're ultimately doing is we're taking this intelligence, we're taking the information, we're pivoting off of it, and then we're whacking them behind the scenes in a huge number of ways to try to stop the losses as much as we possibly can. And sometimes we're successful, but right now we're having some trouble.
So I want to put a pin in the how you're countering this. And when you say you like you and team, like other cybersecurity researchers, you and the team at MetaMask, like, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So MetaMask, we do a lot. And then there's also like a huge number of independent associated security people, crypto security people, Web2 security people. We all work together.
So for the 300 million figure, and I know you said you're insane because you are keeping track of this, I'll give you the persistence for sure. Is that from you just reaching out to people and keeping track of that trail and then basically taking in information as it comes of like, oh, I lost this much. Is that you using internal data from what you've seen at MetaMask? And on that last note, to be clear, this affects the wallet, but you only have eyes on that. What is this cobbled together with both of those? How are you arriving at that number specifically?
Yeah, so it's contrary to popular belief, MetaMask has very little useful data for these sorts of things. So it does not, unfortunately, come from some magical internal data pile that Consensus has. Unfortunately, it does come. So there are certain cases where like the victims are MetaMask users, and therefore they come on my radar in that way originally. But most of it is, so it's a combination. So we have people reporting like they just got hacked and stuff. And like people do this in public, people do this in like semi-private ways. It's also from the on-chain tracing side of things. One of the other reasons that we actually do track these thefts pretty carefully is that they tend to commingle in their laundry. And if you don't have all the inputs, it is very hard to demix the outputs. So for example, if I have, say, $1,000, right, and I'm trying to launder it, and I put in $1,000, if the person who's trying to find me is looking for $1,000 on the other side, if I withdraw $10,000, the person following me is going to have a hard time because it's like they didn't see the other $9,000 go in. They're just looking for $1,000. And so when we actually have a good eyes on the inputs, we're better at tracing, and then we're better at doing all the other things that we do with the on-chain activity. Most of the stories though are like people reporting, people tweeting about it, me having conversations with people. It's like you said, like it's a disarming tactic, and it's very unsettling. And a lot of times people don't know what hit them. And I would say at this point, I've sort of like been around annoying people long enough and helping people long enough that if you are the victim of one of these, like there's a somewhat good chance that someone will recommend that you talk to me, right? Like they're like, oh, Taylor does. I don't know what to tell you, but go talk to Taylor. So a lot of the eyes that I have today are those sorts of things, or prior victims reaching out.
So basically you'll have people reach out, then you have the transaction data from their wallet, and you're able to trace that to where all of this money is pooling. And then from there you can kind of like back engineer maybe where the other flows are coming from.
Yeah. And so and then we'll go talk to them. Yeah.
So
and on and on and on.
How do we know that this is somehow tied to North Korea? Now, for those who don't know, North Korea is behind some of the largest hacks. In fact, I think the largest exchange hack, Bybit, right? Like 1.5 billion. That was the Lazarus.
Largest hack ever.
Yeah.
There were no.
Yeah, I mean,
ever.
They a North Korean group, specifically the Lazarus Group, and I don't know if that's who this is or if it's an offshoot. It's kind of maybe all the same because these are ostensibly state actors, but North Korean Lazarus Group has been notorious. You know, depending on who you ask, they've filched as much as like 6 billion over the last few years, the last 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, I remember reporting on stories back in like 2018 of them doing stuff, and they're still doing it. So,
yep.
Is that because we know their wallets and so we can track them? What other information or footprints are they leaving so that we know the usual suspect?
So there's a couple like different ways that so it's called like attribution. There's a couple different ways that we attribute activity to Lazarus. One is sort of the peculiar tactics and methods that Lazarus and no one else uses. So for example, if they commingle their funds on chain, or if they do something super weird, it's usually like you're like, oh, okay, so the same person has control of that wallet. There's like some exceptions to some of these things, but that's like one really strong indicator, right? If two sets of stolen funds converge in the same place, whoever received that money is either the same person or it's like a service that the two different people are using. If you can rule out the latter, then it basically leaves the former. The other thing is that we do actually have a huge amount of intel and indicators, like hard data. Unfortunately, not from MetaMask or Consensus. We have no data. But everyone else has loads of data, even though it's the blockchain. On a fairly regular basis, just like normal people, their VPNs fail. And then you just see their North Korean IP. And that's always a weird one.
It's not even the sexiest answer. It's just, the hackers don't have the best digital hygiene either sometimes, right?
Sometimes their VPN doesn't work. Or sometimes like they probably get frustrated with their VPN and they like go to switch location and, the packets get through. And
it reminds me of my mom used to read all of the pulpy like People magazines, and Stars would have a segment called Stars. They're just like us. It's like hackers. They're just like no,
they are.
My VPN fails sometimes. They have kids to school before they try to screw you out of your life savings, right?
These things happen, okay? They're just like us. Yeah, and there's also like a huge amount of other things. I personally am not like a deep malware expert, but I work very closely with a lot of people who do like very amazing malware analysis and stuff. Malware is it's code, it's software, it's things that individual humans write. They have certain patterns, they have certain MOs, they have certain mechanisms that they like. If you're watching it over time, you can see the code and the malware evolve. You can also just see them using the exact same malware like over and over again. That's a whole world that I don't really understand. But these specific guys they're specifically, they write Mac malware that is very good, I guess, in terms of malware. It's very impressive. It's very sophisticated. The way that it's been described by like the malware people is that it's basically like native Mac malware rather than like a cross-platform thing or thing that a threat actor built specifically for like Windows and then was like, oh, we got to make it work on Mac. Let's port it over. This is like something that's sort of been built from the ground up for Macs. It also will wreck you on all the other platforms, but like I guess the Mac versions that are written in like Rust and Swift are the ones that are the most impressive and sophisticated. I think it's interesting because it makes sense if you're going to try to steal crypto. A huge portion of this industry has always been on Macs. So like, I don't know, it makes sense to me why they did that, but I still think it's like, I don't know. It's not.
Yeah, it's smart for a number of reasons, and I don't know anything about malware or part of cybersecurity, obviously, but it makes me wonder, I wasn't able to find it. Like I swept my computer, like I said, multiple times with different softwares and not just the freemium ones, right? Like actual paid anti-malware. And it didn't find anything. But my buddy, who I ended up getting infected by, had Windows and he had to run a few sweeps, but he ended up catching it. Yeah. I wonder if what you're saying about this being native speaks to that. If it was easier to hide in plain sight or something on a Mac. But it was terrifying to me because I thought I was clean. And then, like I said, 2 weeks later.
Then they were telling them, There's a couple different ways to like detect malware, the mechanisms that they use to like figure out if it's malware or not. One of the ways that they do so is like basically your malware searcher thing has like a massive list of like strings and hashes that match known malware. But if like a threat actor like steps outside that very specific little box, then it's like not malware because it's not detected. More advanced like malware protection will actually look for like sort of like live patterns or like abnormal things that like should never happen around like persistence and like how do they get the malware to like restart every single time, and they'll flag those. But yeah, like you're basically getting into like EDR territory, which is like CrowdStrike, right? Like these are like more I mean, you could run CrowdStrike on your computer as an individual. It doesn't matter, but like it's just it's sort of
you unpack EVR.
EDR is endpoint detection and response. So you have like antivirus software. That's like the thing that we're all super familiar with. If you're like running a big company, you'll have what's called EDR, and EDR it's endpoint detection and response. It's the way that it's sold is for like sort of this live monitoring and detection and then response. And so like CrowdStrike is like the big one. At the end of the day, though, it is just software, but the mechanisms by which they detect malicious things is more like basically instead of like checking against a database to see if it's malware, it's detecting against various patterns that are just known to be bad. And then if something does that, they'll flag on it. And because of that, it's why it's sort of a more tailored towards like enterprises and companies, because they have a lower threshold, like a lower tolerance. But as an individual, especially in crypto, like you could run this on your machine at all times. It will protect you very, very well. And if you have any amount of knowledge about like computers and systems and what you're doing on your computer, you'll be able to know whether something is like a true positive or a potential false positive with like no effort at all. So yeah.
So getting in a little bit more to what this malware does specifically, I was under the ignorant impression that they're just going after telegrams and trying to get as many people in the web as possible, which doesn't make any sense if you just think about it from just intuitively. It's like, well, what good is the telegram if you can't get anything else into the computer? So the telegram is just the syringe, so to speak, to transmit this, right? Or maybe the cough to transmit the virus.
Yeah.
But the malware itself, it sounds like a complete Trojan horse where they have access to everything on your computer. What wallet types are most vulnerable to this? Obviously, if you have like your private keys and plain text on your computer, those are gone. But which wallet types are most vulnerable? Or are they all just kind of equally vulnerable to this? Basically, to ask it another way, how do they get access to your funds once this is on your computer?
Yeah. So there's a couple things the malware does. So once you run the script, as I said like before, like you run the script and then it does this thing and then it goes and it gets more things and downloads things and it exfiltrates things and all this stuff happens. Ultimately, what it's doing though, like what the malware is doing is twofold. The first thing it's doing is it's hunting through your entire computer for anything that they want. And generally speaking with these guys, the number one goal is to get crypto. They want your crypto. They want your wallets. They want your money. That's their entire job. That's what their entire life revolves around. Like if they don't steal any crypto, they like get sent to like the Gulag and it's really bad. So like that's their goal. End of conversation. However, in order to achieve that goal, they do a whole bunch of different things. And so yes, they will take any secrets that are on your device. So your keys, your passwords, they'll take those. Any place that you store passwords, private keys, seed phrases, they'll take like the whole thing. So your like Chrome storage that has your password saved, they'll take the whole thing. It'll hunt for wallets that are browser extension wallets and also like desktop wallets, I guess we call them, right? Like the actual desktop wallets. Any place that those store the private keys sort of like under the hood, they'll take all of that. So there's two types of wallets that are like somewhat better at protecting you. The first is obviously hardware wallets, right? Because there's no key on your device to actually take the hardware. Like the key is completely separate. And so they cannot just steal the key unless you're like so many people and you've also saved your hardware wallet key on your device. Then they take that. Just FYI. Don't stop it.
Which, like, don't ever do that, guys. That completely neutralizes the purpose of having the hardware wallet.
But you cannot imagine the times where people come in, they go, my Trezor got hacked, my Ledger got hacked, which, by the way, this is like a good indicator that, like, I'm like, okay, hey, have you had any calls lately? And the answer's like, actually. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, have you signed any transactions with your hardware wallet lately? And if they say no, Then I tell them to go search their computer because they stored their seed on it. And then every single time they say no, 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 no. And then they come back a day later and they're like, so I guess I had an Apple Note.
Right. I don't want to make light because it's an awful thing. But as long as your keys aren't on your computer, the hardware wallet, I assume, would be safe unless they were trying to engineer some sort of address swap, like mid.
Well,
that's not even possible, right?
Oh no, they're very clever. They're very good. This is why they steal so much money. But generally speaking, if you have a hardware wallet and you have not taken a photo of it, put it in Apple Notes, in keychain, whatever, then your hardware wallet is safe, at least for now, right? Like they cannot take the seed and steal all your money. The other type of wallet that is like slightly better than like your regular daily driver wallets is any wallet that has like, let's call it like strong encryption at rest. However, it requires you to not ever use that wallet. So if you're storing your keys in an encrypted form on your computer and you never use the keys ever, then they have to do more work to get those keys. However, keep in mind, they haven't just taken like the wallet data from your computer. They've also taken every single password, every single secret, every single everything. And if you are using that wallet, so you're unlocking it and relocking it, it's like trivial for them to get the password or to get like the unencrypted state of the thing. So basically don't have your keys on your computer, use a hardware wallet. Okay, so then the other thing though that this malware can do is besides just go hunt through your entire computer for all the places that they know secrets exist, is they can just drop more code onto your computer at any time that they want. And that code can be whatever they want. And this is like, now we're getting into like Bybit territory, right? Like this is how these hacks happen, is like the first step is that they gain the initial access. They'll go through everything. They'll read your documentation. They'll figure out who you are. They figure out what access you have. Then they figure out how to get the money. Where's the money? And if they're blocked by that because it's on a server somewhere, because it's a hardware wallet, then they build you something. Then they write some code to get around that. In this case, the most common way that they end up like ruining you, even though your keys aren't on your device, is that they will drop a malicious version of your wallet that you use. So if you use MetaMask, they have many versions of malicious versions of MetaMask. If you use Atomic, they have Atomics. If you use Phantom, Ravi, Ledger Live, I've seen. Basically, yeah, whatever you're using to sign with your hardware wallet, they'll replace your software wallet on disk. And the software wallet on disk will basically be exactly the same, except there will be like 10 lines of code that are hooked in there that anytime you go to sign a transaction, like let's say you want to send money, let's say you want to like swap, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what you try to do. No matter what, your wallet is going to rewrite that transaction. And so that the transaction that gets sent to your hardware wallet for signing is going to be the transaction that they wrote for you. And they've been doing this since the first time I became aware of it was in 2020, was with a malicious version of MetaMask it was a Nexus Mutual QCarp hack. And nobody believed him. No, people were like, no, you kept your ledger on your device. What the hell? And then they did an investigation. They found the malicious version of MetaMask. They diffed the code, and you could see it was like 20 lines of code. But basically, in that case, they'd identified that he had a huge amount of Nexus Mutual tokens. And so the next transaction that he went to sign on his ledger, he thought he was sending like 100 USDC, but the transaction that actually went to his ledger device was for basically all of his NXM tokens, and then those were sent to the threat actor's wallet, and they were gone.
A question with this: would you be able to spot this if you were verifying the address on your ledger? Because the hardware wallets reproduce the recipient address locally onto the offline, hardware wallet, right? So, can they spoof that too, or
they cannot? So
you really got to be paying attention. This is why
that's
yeah. I mean,
and
not to like, it's terrible because like I got hacked, so I'm not like, don't want to like, throw rocks when I live in a house full of glass. But it just goes back to the fact that you really need to make sure that you're really disciplined with your hygiene on these things, because
Yeah.
if you follow more steps than not, you might be able to catch it before it happens. But most people just don't think about it.
Yeah.
Our wallet's
And
secure. I do this all the time. My computer's safe. You get complacent.
yeah, exactly. And with hardware wallets, it's especially tough. So when we're talking about like straight Bitcoin transfers, I think it's like there's a better chance that you're going to detect it, because you can like, in 100% of cases, you're going to be able to look and see the address that you're sending and see if it matches. You do need to be careful, like in terms of actually checking the characters, because they can do like, it's quite easy to like basically get a lookalike address. But, if you check every character, they can't do that. So yes, once you're in Ethereum land and Solana land, the information that's shown on your device is not necessarily, like, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And even if it does mean something, there's just like, you have to have such a deep level of understanding. So for example, with the NXM hack, right, back in 2020, we've improved a lot since then. However, it's still like a fundamental issue. So he was trying to send a bazillion NXM tokens. The address that was he was trying to send a small amount of tokens. He ended up sending the full amount. On his hardware wallet, if he had verified very carefully, and if he had checked the two address would not necessarily have been different, because when you're sending a token on Ethereum, the to address is actually the token contract, because you're basically communicating with the token contract and instructing it to send your tokens. And then in the data field is the address that you want to send to. And so sometimes on your ledger, at least it used to be like this, the to address on your ledger is just the token contract address. So it'd be like the Tether token contract address or the NXM one or whatever. And then the parameters that had the real data that you had to check were later and more obfuscated, and it's less likely that you look at them. The second part is like, even if you like verify the address or whatever, you then also have to check the amount. And this can sometimes be a poor experience in both Ethereum and Bitcoin. If they're showing the amount in like Satoshis, you're like trying to map in your head. You're like, let me move the decimals over.
No one thinks Satoshis,
Yeah.
Really
And
hard
so there's just like all these little caveats. And obviously like the more complex the interaction is, if you're trying to swap, if you're doing a multi-sig signature, there's all these ways that it's just not as straightforward to verify.
Yeah.
There's like,
and sorry, it sounds like account-based models like Ethereum and Solana, there's just more moving parts that you might miss when you're doing this versus UTXO.
Yeah, well, and it's just like the types of things that you're doing. Like, I mean, they're like, you're like reorienting a position for this nested staked asset or whatever. There's no interface right now that's like showing you what's actually going to happen, right? And then like expecting your little ledger screen is like, I mean, hold on, I have my ledger right here, I'll show you. There ain't no way that this little fucking screen is gonna show you anything, guys. It cannot. And like the newer ones had bigger screens, but not that much bigger. And it's not, it's just, yeah, it's tough. So again, that's why I say on my iOS when I'm signing these days, it's a pain in the butt. The wallets are not the greatest. I yell at MetaMask all the time. Guys, what are we doing? But it's because I just don't have faith that I'm going to detect everything.
So it's like if someone who leads cybersecurity at a premier browser wallet is saying that, then everyone should take notice. I have one more question on the swaps that they do for the browser wallets and software wallets, because I think that's really important for maybe some people listening who might have been affected by this, or just to keep their ears up if they feel like they ran into this problem. Yeah. If they're swapping your MetaMask, so you said there's like 10, 20 lines of code that basically backdoor it for any sort of shenanigans. Are they literally just are they taking your private key, altering MetaMask, and then just like re-uploading it with the malicious code? Are they creating a perfect clone that shows your balance? how do they make
it's a-
sure that it look like functionally under the hood, it's not your wallet? Like, how do you see what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah,
how do you
yeah.
actually replicate all of the parameters of your wallet while also make sure
So
that they can screw you with it?
it's wild because both MetaMask and Google Chrome have done a huge number of things to try to prevent this from being possible, because it's code. It should, if you change the code, things should break. Google specifically, because they have sort of like more access to your device and stuff, Google has really worked hard at this. And so if you go right now and you manipulate your, just like pick a random, well, I don't recommend doing this, but you can if you really want. Go pick a random Chrome extension, go to like the underlying file folder on your computer, manipulate it, change a line of code. It'll actually, like Chrome will actually kick you out. Like it'll stop the extension. It won't let you use the extension. It'll like basically like internally explode and be like, ah. However, every single thing that like MetaMask does or Chrome does to try to prevent them from doing this, there's usually like a way around, because ultimately they have root access to the device. And ultimately, like the detection has to come from somewhere. The verification has to come, like there has to be, you have to do something to detect it. And so they have a constantly evolving toolbox of ways that they get around this. But ultimately what they do, they're touching like the minimal amount of files on your computer. And so they know the wallet. Like this was like sort of how I got originally obsessed with them, was like back in 2020 when I was like, whoa, there's not that many people who've like gone through the MetaMask code base, and it is not a pleasant code base. Ask any of our engineers, literally any of them, they will tell you a whole bunch of really gruesome details about why it's a bitch to do anything to MetaMask. And it
I
was
mean,
like,
it's got hundreds of coins and tokens at this point, right? Like it's just got to be an
yeah.
absolute mess underneath.
And it's almost a decade old. We haven't done like a full rewrite ever. So we got tax we got it's not, yeah. But anyway, so they sort of touch the minimal amount of things. So it's not like they're dropping like a full, like the whole thing, so to speak. They'll figure out the one little thing that they need to like hook into, and then they'll do that. And if they have to evade Chrome or MetaMask or anyone's detection, they'll do that. But essentially, it's hard to explain, but like essentially, like in all cases, wallets have to interface with like the ledger or the Trezor. And so there's always pieces of the code base that are always going to be hooking out and hooking back in. So they can either hook into the code base in the wallet itself, that section of the code that hooks in and out. It's usually like a transaction controller or whatever. Since they have root access to your device, they can also try to like hook into the hook, the transport layer, right? Because it's code. Your entire computer is code.
So it sounds like the swapping thing is mostly for them trying to get hardware wallet funds. But if you have any hot funds on your MetaMask, then they're just going to take them. Although this leads to my next question. Granted, I have like a poppers on my MetaMask because I don't keep anything hot unless I'm just using it for, trading or just to sign transactions or something like that, right? Like I never keep anything more than $1,000 on a hot wallet on my computer. But they didn't end up sweeping anything. And you had some theories as to why that might have been. Can you get into those for the people who are like, oh, well, like I was compromised, but my MetaMask is fine. Like they haven't taken anything. Kind of why might they be waiting, or why might they just pass it over?
Yeah, so it also goes back to like your Telegram point. Like what is their point, or like what are they doing here? So I think it's useful to understand that why like Lazarus, North Korea, DPRK, like why they're fundamentally different threat actors than basically any other threat group on Earth, is that they are like financially motivated, meaning that they like want money, but they're also like state sponsored, state backed. They're actually like working for their government in the same way that like the FBI works for the US government, right? The key difference, obviously, is the FBI is working for the US government, and the US government is then working for its citizens, for the taxpayers and people, right? North Korea, not so much. It's just the regime. They're kind of out for themselves. Everything is for themselves. There's a lot of propaganda saying that it's for like people. It is not. It's just for themselves. It's kind of like a job, right? Except like most communist states, it's very weird for the Western mind to imagine a job where you don't actually get rewarded whatsoever for anything. And so because of this financial motive combined with this very odd thing where these hackers are working for a third party / their boss / the state, whatever, what ends up happening is things like this where like they don't steal the money. Like, what the heck? The only sense that I have is that for low dollar values, there's no upside for them, because even though they're hackers, they're not hacking for themselves. They're hacking for the state, for the regime, for their bosses. They don't keep any of that money, $0. What they get from it is like sort of a fulfillment towards their quota, which may put them in a better position in life, or more likely avoids a detrimental position in their life, meaning that like they don't go to the gulag or any number of other negative things that can happen, right? So if you think about it, if they get on your device and you have $500, there's no upside to taking it. The downside, even though it's a very low downside, like the possible downside is that you realize the wallet is hacked, you realize your computer is hacked, and then you're going to clean up better or something. And then that like sort of closes the door, so to speak. Because if you don't realize how fully you've been compromised, you might keep using the wallet. You might just like forget in like a year and put a huge amount of money in that wallet for some reason. And they'd rather leave that door open, especially because, again, the $500 isn't going to change anything about anything.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It's an opportunity cost risk. And I also really, in a twisted way, I kind of like this corporate KPI perspective on it, where it's like, crazy. Well, Do Kwon got 200 million, and so, Lee, you really need to bump up those numbers, buddy. You've only gotten 10,000 this week. And that would make sense to me in the sense that if you're looking at this from a carrot and a stick perspective, you want to bring in the biggest haul. So if you get some poor schmuck who's only got like a $500 of USDT or $500 of Ethereum, you're going to want to wait for that honeypot to fill up a little bit more before you mess with it, because otherwise you could be spending your time going after a whale rather than a guppy, right? And so ultimately it just might not be worth it. And you pointed out in your investigations and some of your reporting on this on Twitter or X that they're really going after founders. They're really going after people who lead some of these DeFi or crypto projects. Their real targets are the big swingers in the community. And if they get someone like me, if I have a lot of my MetaMask, that's great. But otherwise, they're going to use me as a transmission vector to try to get to other people as well, right? So
exactly. And that's like like when we were talking about the malware, what does the malware do? What does it take? So the malware does a huge, like it takes all these secrets. It does all this stuff. It leaves the back door open, right? But it's kind of interesting because one of the things the malware does specifically is it has like an entire little section of the code base that's purely dedicated to your Telegram. And this has evolved over time, and it seems to be like in direct response to their realization that like crypto founders, Telegram is like the thing that everyone uses. Telegram also just has a weird like operating structure, like where the actual messages and session cookies are is quite odd. And so they have this whole custom thing to take the Telegram. I was a bit surprised by this because like really how valuable is the Telegram account? And I think that it turns out it's actually way more valuable than you might imagine. And so I think that they sort of look at you like when they're identifying, like when they like land you as a victim, they're like identifying like, okay, there's one path is like, this is like the dude that has the crypto. And if you're not the dude, you're not rich man, you're not the dude with the crypto, they like reposition you as like the dude who knows the dude with the crypto. And thus like, and that's why there's like sections of this malware that are basically like, okay, how do we make this guy valuable even though he's poor? Sorry. Like I laugh at this shit, but like that's the best I figure. But yeah, and the other thing is that personally I think I undervalued the Telegram mechanism. It is insanely disarming. And because they've managed to like grab the raw session keys out of the Telegram, even if you like change your password or add 2FA, it actually doesn't matter because they'll get in with the session cookie. I think that's just like an insanely valuable thing for them. But you also said like it had been a couple weeks, right? Like you had
it had been a couple weeks, and I think, to your point about opportunity costs, if you infiltrate someone's computer and make them think everything's fine, you're going to probably be able to do more damage if you don't act immediately, right? If you're kind of moving under the cover of darkness and striking when they don't expect it. And going back to your point about Telegram, to me, it seems like a perfect storm of maybe not coincidences, but just features of Telegram, in the sense that they store the cookies in a weird way that allows for access. Because I did change my Telegram stuff and it ended up not mattering at all. The other thing too is like
I wish Telegram would do something about this. Like I feel like they can do something.
Let's get to my next point. Like everyone uses it in crypto. They have over 1 billion monthly active users and they have no support basically. Now I don't know how you're supposed to have support for a platform that has 1 billion users. This is not Meta, right? This isn't Facebook. Telegram doesn't have the resources and the manpower that a Mag 7 company like Meta has. So it's also extremely convenient to them for, if this happens to you, you're basically screwed. You're not going to get that account back. Like there's no one in Telegram, especially now that they're inundated with requests on this. There's no way that they're going to chew through that and actually be able to restore your account to you. So it seems to me that there's like this trifecta of coincidences with the cookies, the fact that it's widely used in our industry, and the fact that it just has such poor support that it's the perfect target for something like this. So
no, your point about Telegram not, and so Telegram does react to certain very select cases, and it is very, very select. However, it is almost always what they call like a real threat of in real life violence, meaning like terrorism, basically. There's like a line that they have at that point where if Telegram or people are being used to orchestrate a murder or a terrorist plot, they do have the ability to like turn off. It's totally centralized. They can do whatever they want with the account, right? That's just where their line is, and they refuse to lower the bar, even when the accounts are being like, even when we have strong evidence that the account is taken over, it's being used by the threat actor to send known malicious shit through. It's actively sending malicious files, right? So like on the one hand, like I realize why they do this, right? They want to be a platform for people. They don't want to be serving everyone's data on a silver platter, especially not to France or the US government. I get it. On the other hand, I think the best thing that they could do in this case would be to understand how the threat actors are stealing these accounts and close those doors. For example, if you change your password, like kill the session keys, or hey, wild fucking idea here. If a session key is being used on device 1 and then is cloned and tries to be used on device 2, don't fucking allow it. It's a fucking session cookie. It's not supposed to be used on a different device at the same time somewhere else.
I mean, I don't know.
Why are you allowing this?
Right. I don't know too much about cybersecurity, but I do know that the two things that you just said are pretty basic. Anytime I've used any other service, if I change the password, every single session gets logged out immediately, and then you have to start a new one. Makes a lot of sense.
Which is expected. Yeah. If you change your password, and you want that, right? If you change your password, you don't want the other phone to have access anymore. That's why you're changing the password.
So Pavel, if you're listening to this, maybe don't focus on that potential IPO this year, and then try to figure out a way to fix this problem for your billions of users.
Yeah. Please.
All right.
Please.
One more question for you, Taylor, before we have kind of closing thoughts. You've been doing some, how should we say, counterinsurgency here, against this threat. And you mentioned stealing payloads. It seems like you and some other folks in the cybersecurity community have been trying to be proactive and trying to at least push back against this somewhat. You can't totally contain the fire, but you can dampen it a little bit. What have been some of your strategies? And when you say you're stealing payloads, are you basically, you're going on there under the guise that you're about to be duped, and then you basically take the code that they're giving you and you analyze it. What are some of your strategies for combating this?
So I will say, like, there are way smarter people that are doing like way more technical stuff than me. My preferred method of countering a threat, so to speak, my favorite method, right? I just like to basically troll the shit out of them at all times. Okay? Like, I don't know why people keep putting threat actors on a fucking platter and like treating them like they're anything else. No, dude, they want to get on calls. Let's get on calls. I'm going to take every calendar slot of yours and you're going to get on a call with me. So that's like one thing I do. I have a big Kim Jong-un poster. So whenever I go on the calls with them, Kim Jong-un is like sitting right here smiling, which always makes them they always like rage quit right then. They really like hiding. So most threat actors will just like, their malware is free for the taking. One reason why perhaps malware scans don't always work on this malware is because GPRKs, they iterate on their malware very quickly, but they also, it's not something that they'll drop to anyone at all times. So for example, when I got on a call with them last week, finally, after a while, I finally snuck in, they registered and set up the domain less than an hour before my scheduled call. The exact URL that they were going to give me went live maybe 15 minutes before I got on the call. They dropped it to me, and within 5 minutes of them seeing Kim Jong-un hanging out behind me, they'd taken down the first stage, the second stage payload, the Zoom URL, deleted the entire chat, blocked me everywhere, probably told all their buddies to watch out for my new persona. They don't like being trolled. They definitely don't like people to like get their malware in full and investigate it, especially if they don't like get a theft alongside with it. But yeah, the other thing, I mean, most of what we do is very boring, but it's here to protect people. So MetaMask has a number of features that if you visit a malicious site, we will warn you about it. This is, again, one reason why these guys like to spin up their domains very quickly and use them one time and one time only, is to try to prevent me from blocking them before they land their payload. But if you use MetaMask, in most cases, you will get like a little anti-phishing screen if you have MetaMask enabled at this point. Sometimes they get around it because it's cat and mouse, constant cat and mouse.
Yeah, their tactics are constantly evolving, so y'all's are.
It's so annoying. So that's, yeah. The other thing is just, honestly, is like the more that you know about what they're doing, how they're operating, where their weak points are, what motivates them, what they're doing, the better equipped we are at reacting and educating people, whether that's directly in our product or like adjacent to our product, or just like me yelling on Twitter at people. A great example is like the Telegram thing, right? A lot of people assumed, and because like the victim blaming culture, right? There was like a series of victims who were like, but I changed my Telegram password, they still took it. And 99% of people heard that and was like, you probably didn't change your Telegram password. You should have changed your Telegram password. Then they told the next 10 victims, make sure you change your password, right? Until you like ask the question, like, wait, does changing your password actually do anything? Like, how are they getting, what are they taking, right? Until you investigate it in full, you're not able to sort of properly advise, which was happening for a long time, honestly, way too long. And then, yeah, just everything, like, for me, it's like a lot of it is understanding what is bypassing people's red flag, like their red flag detectors, I call them. You have been in this industry for a fantastic amount of time. You've seen it all, right? You're not an idiot. The fact that you haven't been hacked in like a decade of this shit is testament to the fact that you're not a fucking idiot, right? Okay. Why did you fall for this? And the answer is not, Twitter will tell you that it's because you're an idiot. I'm sorry, but they're wrong, dude. They're wrong. No, there's 1,000 other answers to that question. And if you can answer them, then you can address like the underlying issue, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, that's what we do. That's what the security team at MetaMask we're doing constantly with all different threat actors. I do it with security researchers at other wallets, other projects in the space, malware guys, all sorts of people. We're trying to simultaneously help and protect people, and also just fuck with the bad guys. Like, don't let them off easy.
I love this idea of like DDoSing them with trolling. You can, because you can take the payloads as y'all are doing and analyze them and get from any of them, and you kind of figure some things out. But there's only so much it could teach you. And the other side of the equation is just making sure that they can't go and get someone else, and you just kind of mess with them. And on that point, I think you have this on your X page, but Ricardo Spagni, Fluffy Pony, mentioned how they're on Discord now, and he was talking to one guy, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll help you with this thing as long as you say, but you have to write to me. Kim Jong-un is a big fat dork or something like that."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." It's like, why?
They can't do it.
So
wait, hold on. That mechanism is actually, if you are unsure if you're talking to a scammer, that's actually a really good way to like clear the air, because in basically 100% of cases, if the threat actor is North Korean, they actually they will not talk shit about their dear leader or their country or anything like that. But even if they're not North Korean, a lot of times those threat actors will see you asking that question, and they'll be like, I'm not going to waste my time. This person's too smart. And so they'll peace out too.
Yeah.
And so it's basically just like throwing a flag above your head, being like, I'm smart and I will not be scammed. And if you do that, it actually protects you.
Yeah. So if you're worried about this, your safe word or your safe phrase could be Kim Jong-un sucks eggs, and then you'll be fine, because then they won't be able to say anything back. Taylor, this has been great. We're going on an hour here. And you kind of, I think, already said this in terms of takeaways here in terms of just this is constantly evolving, and try to give yourself some grace in the sense that it's really complex and a very, very malicious attack, the most precise I've ever seen. But what are your takeaways for this for our listeners in terms of things they should be doing to protect themselves, or what they need to know about this whole saga?
Yeah, so on like the very specifics, it's like, if this has happened to you or does happen to you, turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the computer in that order. Using a different device, go reset your passwords, move your crypto to a new place, re-up and recheck your MFA, hardware wallets to have like the YubiKeys or Google Authenticator on your phone. Like, do all of those things immediately. Then once you've done all that, wipe the device, get a new device, etc. Anything you do on the computer, once they land the payload, anything that you like have or do on the computer, they can theoretically see. Definitely kill in Telegram the sessions. There's like a thing under devices that says terminate all other sessions. Like, do that from your phone. More generally speaking, though, like broadly speaking, like, how do you stay safe in this insane industry? So number one is just be skeptical. I think that a lot of times scammers get away with doing things because they're not questioned, because people are scared to like push back. If a VC is proposing that you use some like esoteric video call platform, don't use it and tell them that scammers like use this, right? If you're having technical difficulties and they want you to run code, like, just don't. Just take a second. And my like go-to line for this is basically like, sorry, this is crypto. Everything's insane. I'm not saying you are a scammer, but you could absolutely be a scammer. I'm going to stop. And then I will like literally just pause, right? Just stop. And if this is a legit person, a legit VC, a legit partner, a legit whatever, they should either understand you and take that seriously and respect that. And if they don't, they're a freaking idiot and they're going to get wrecked. And if you're nice, you'll educate them in that moment so that they don't get wrecked in the future. But also like maybe just reconsider and like don't take money from them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a weird, you are in the position of power where I think a lot of people do a lot of stupid things because they're like sort of on their heels and they think like, oh no, I can't push back on this VC who might invest in me. No, you can. And like a real VC is going to respect you more for that. The other thing is just like, yeah, anytime someone tells you to do something, especially if it's urgent, if they're pestering you about it, again, like, just pause. Do things on your own terms, not because someone tells you. If you feel like embarrassed like lay it out on the table and say like, sorry, there's a lot of scammers here. I gotta double check this. Or, hey, you know what? My daughter's crying right now, or my wife just walked in. I'm going to have to call you back in 10 minutes and just stop, right? Because the second that your brain is split between all these different things, your sort of like detection ability plummets, to be honest. There's so many cases with all different types of scams where people say, like, my dad had just gotten out of surgery and I was thinking about that. And so I just clicked. Or, yeah, I was racing to get my daughter's school. I had to sign because I was going to be late to pick up my daughter, or I was sick, or, you know, like the dog had just vomited on the carpet. Like, you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily that that specific thing allowed them to be scammed. It's that that thing was like eating up a huge portion of their like brain. And you need your brain to be able to detect scams. And the second that it's split, you can't reliably, like, your red flag detection just goes out the window. And then that's what the scammers take advantage of. So keep that in mind, and always like just pause, take a breath, reset. Don't do things that people tell you to do. And yeah, it helps to assume that everyone is North Korean and ask them if they're North Korean, because
It helps.
you know.
It helps to recognize that you could always be swimming with sharks in the water. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was don't take a 6:30 a.m. call when your daughter's in your lap, when your infant daughter is in your lap and wiggling around. And also, one thing for me would have been just send the invite yourself through your, like, if you like are using Google Suite, send the Google Meet link yourself. And if they have a problem with that, that should raise alarm bells. But
And especially today, I don't like, there's fake call platforms. These are so common. There will come a point where you'll see a VC and a founder fighting because they're both trying to send each other the legit Google links. And you know what? We'll cross that bridge when we get there, and everyone will be better for us. We're not there yet, though. So just let it happen for now.
we're not there yet, but hopefully one day we'll be there instead of having to deal.
I will be, if that's the problem to solve, like, I've done my job.
I'm doing good. Taylor Monahan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. Everyone, go check out her X profile. I'll link it in the show notes, as well as a really good article on SecureList that breaks down basically every inch of this malware and this attack so that you can be guarded against it. Stay frosty out there. Do not make the same mistakes I did. Thank you, Taylor. Take it easy.
Thank you.